This is 5 Live Formula One with Jack Nichols.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the 8th round of the 2022 Formula One World Championship. This is the Azerbaijan Grand Prix from the capital city Baku, the streets of the capital city Baku. And what an interesting weekend we are in for. Max Verstappen leads the championship for Red Bull, 9 points ahead of Charles Leclerc. But those top two, after finishing first and second on so many occasions this season, finished third and fourth last time out in Monaco. It was Perez who took the win for Red Bull and Sainz second for Ferrari. But it is still going to be Verstappen versus Leclerc in the championship fight. Alongside me is the former McLaren Formula One mechanic Mark Priestley. We also have the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. And here we go, round 8, Red Bull versus Ferrari, and Baku always throws up a bit of something.
It does do that, doesn't it? It's one of those circuits that's sort of slightly weird when you look at it on a bit of paper, but actually it always does throw something up. And it's, I guess that's been the story of this track, hasn't it? It's got this incredibly long straight on the one hand, which really does celebrate the top speed of these cars. But on the other hand, the first sector of this lap, particularly tight and twisty. You go through the old part of town, which is very, very slow, very low speed, and relies on some very different characteristics of the car. So we've got two cars at the front of this field who have very different strengths and weaknesses. Different sections of this circuit are going to suit either one of those, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be fascinating to see what unfolds over the course of the weekend. As I say, it's Verstappen who leads the championship, but Verstappen shouldn't be leading the championship, right? He's 9 points ahead of Charles Leclerc, but he shouldn't be after Monaco.
Well, I mean, Ferrari snatched defeat from the jaws of victory in Monaco, didn't they? And this championship, because of these different characteristics of the two leading cars, some circuits are going to suit some teams, some are going to suit others, and you really do have to make the most of the ones that suit your car. Monaco should have hands down been a Ferrari circuit. They qualified on the front row, locked it out. That should have been a 1-2 finish in the Grand Prix. You can't afford to miss those opportunities, and that's what they did. Red Bull took advantage, and that's why they're leading this championship. This weekend, you have to say, with that top speed of the Red Bull car and this incredibly long straight that Baku has, there's a very good chance that Red Bull could extend.
Very pleasant day in Baku, clear blue skies, 26 degrees, the air temperature, track temperature's at 43 degrees, just a bit of a breeze blowing in off the, well, quite a big breeze actually, blowing in off the Caspian Sea, which is just to the east of the city, and a circuit that's been on the calendar now for a few years. And this first hour of running will be very interesting indeed. I think we don't have any free practice one drivers for this session, so it's all the usual folk that will be getting out onto the track in about 2 minutes' time. Andrew Benson, how are you doing, and what are you looking ahead to this weekend?
Well, I mean, it's another Red Bull-Ferrari battle, isn't it, as you say, Jack? I am a bit worried for Ferrari this weekend. I expect to see Charles Leclerc on pole. If he can put it on pole last year in that Ferrari, then he can certainly put it on pole in Baku in this Ferrari, and he's brilliant at street tracks, and he seems to love this one. People remember back to his debut year with Ferrari in 2019. He should have put that on pole and possibly won it as well, but he crashed at the entrance to the castle section. But as Mark was saying, the Red Bull does have a straight line speed advantage, and the Ferrari drivers were actually talking about that in the press conferences this morning. Leclerc said he's still confident of a good result if they get the car set up right, but if you look back to races like Saudi Arabia, Miami, I think it's on the form of the season so far, it's hard to see Ferrari winning this, even if Leclerc puts it on pole, which I expect he will.
Yeah, well, we'll start to get a look at exactly how the session's going to, or the weekend's going to unfold when the cars do go out on circuit. Most of the drivers are sitting at the wheel of their cars. Charles Leclerc's sitting at his Ferrari and just putting the steering wheel on. Second place in the championship, as I say, hasn't actually won since Melbourne. 2 wins in the first 3 races, but no wins in the last 4 races for Leclerc. In fact, only 1 podium finish in the last 4 races for Leclerc, which is quite something.
The maths are quite shocking. You know, after 3 races, he was 46 points ahead, I think it was. 4 races later, he's 9 points behind. That's a 55-point swing in Red Bull's favour. Some of that is the engine failure that he had in Spain. And And then some of it is the mistake that he made in Imola at the end of the race. But of course, there was the Ferrari strategy snafu, for want of a better word, in Monaco.
I don't think there is a better word.
Yeah,
I don't think you should want for one.
I think also what's interesting about the mass is that although Verstappen's retired twice, he's lost 36 points through those two retirements because he was in second place to Leclerc both times. But Leclerc, through his engine failure error and the Monaco strategy, has lost 40 plus points. So actually he's lost out more through external factors or errors than Verstappen has in the championship so far, and that is why the championship position is the way it is.
For those of you syncing up, Lewis Hamilton is just leaving the garage, and we've got 59 minutes and 22, 21, 20 seconds left on the clock. Hashtag BBC F1 on Twitter, F1 at bbc.co.uk on the emails if you want to get in touch. Is there any, not concern, but question marks over Verstappen coming into this weekend after lackluster is a bit harsh for Monaco,
harsh,
but
yeah.
you know where I'm coming from, right? Perez sort of had the hold over him all weekend.
Yeah, he did, and he was kind of on par with him in Barcelona, so I think that's more of a sign of how good Perez is in his run of form at the moment, which is a great positive for the team. I don't think we can take too much. Monaco's a unique circuit, has very different characteristics, and look, these cars are very different to the cars that we've had in previous years. Cars in previous years that Max Verstappen has been so comfortable with, so tuned into, almost designed around him, some might even suggest. And so when it comes to a circuit like Monaco, he's just been all over it. Whereas this one, I feel like he's having to work a little bit harder, maybe make some adaptations to his style to get the best out of the Red Bull, which he's done on many occasions. On Monaco, it seemed a little bit harder to make that happen.
I think what's interesting about this year, among many things that's interesting about this year, is that we're seeing at both Red Bull and Ferrari how car characteristics can have an impact on driver performance. It's something that people kind of can tend to disregard, and it is true that the best drivers can drive around most car characteristics. And let's be fair, Verstappen has still been the more impressive Red Bull driver by far this year than he has been just as in previous years. But what's going on with Red Bull and Ferrari is that Red Bull has a slightly understeery car, and Verstappen doesn't like understeer, and Perez does. He doesn't like understeer, but he's more happy with an understeery balance. He doesn't like a nervous rear end. Whereas at Ferrari, they've got a slightly oversteery car. Leclerc is very comfortable with oversteer. He's more of a Verstappen-Hamilton type driver, and Sainz isn't comfortable with that. And so we're seeing, again, although Leclerc was faster than Sainz last year on balance, the gap between them has extended this year, whereas at Red Bull the gap between the two drivers has come down, and it's because of those characteristics.
Those characteristics really are, they shouldn't be overlooked. I mean, you're absolutely right. They are, I always sort of try to liken it in a way that people might understand, is if you've been writing with your right hand for years and then someone asks you to write with your left hand, you still know how to write. It's just a very different way of doing it, and it will take some time to adapt to that. You may end up being as good with your left hand as you were with your right, but only after some time.
A lot of wandering down the straights with the steering.
Vettel reporting wandering down the straights with the steering. The cool drivers like oversteer, though, don't they? And can deal with oversteer. Like generally speaking, that's always my feeling.
Well, I don't know. Is that true?
I don't know.
Define a cool driver. So,
well, I'll do that. I'll define a cool driver. Kimi Raikkonen.
Yeah.
We all agree he's a cool driver.
Yeah.
Absolutely could not drive a car unless it had an incredibly pointy front end, which meant the rear end was a bit loose. He felt we could deal with that. But if we ever had a car the other way round, he was lost. So.
Whereas Fernando Alonso, also a cool driver, I would argue, can drive anything, but
what does he prefer?
But he doesn't prefer oversteer. He prefers understeer. In fact,
Alonso's just gone down in my estimation.
Someone at Ferrari told me that he doesn't remember throughout the entire time that Alonso and Massa were teammates. Massa always asked for more front end, and Alonso always asked for a more stable rear, all the time.
Yeah, okay. Let's throw this into the mix then. Was that Fernando doing part of his let's draw the team to my side, let's throw some spanner in the works? I mean, he did do a bit of that, didn't he? Power games that he used to play at various teams in the past. But
well, you would know, Mark.
I didn't know. But look, who knows? I mean, either way, you have to be comfortable in your car, and how comfortable you are with the characteristics of your car makes a massive difference to the performance that you get out, the combination of car and driver. Some of them still getting to grips with theirs in 2022.
Sound you can hear is Lewis Hamilton coming through the quick sequence of corners at the end of the lap, flat out kinks basically, and then down towards the line. You can hear that rather irritating noise as the car scraping along the floor, and he is bouncing around on the run down towards the first corner, Lewis Hamilton. That looks fairly brutal, that.
I mean, look, if you've got this porpoising or bouncing issue, don't forget it's an aerodynamic issue. We have the longest straight on the calendar here, and there's a very high chance that will be exacerbated at the extreme speeds and for the extreme length of time that you're in those conditions here. So, yeah, Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, I think, coming into the weekend with some trepidation that they were expecting this, and early signs are that they have some work to do to overcome that still.
Max Verstappen is at the top of the times after 6 minutes, so 1 minute 48.574. He's on the medium tyres, the majority of the field on mediums, bar Leclerc on hards and Sainz on hards, and the two Aston Martins of Vettel and Stroll on soft tyres. Everybody else is on the mediums at the moment. Perez goes into second place, 9/10ths back from Verstappen. Hamilton is coming up into the tight right-hander of turn 7 before swinging it left into 8 on the castle section, and the narrowest point on a Formula 1 track as he comes over the top and then around the left-hand loops that then take him down towards the downhill braking zone of turn 15. And that's when we'll get a middle sector split from Lewis Hamilton now, and it's just after, actually, isn't it? It's just after 15 on the run down to 16. Oh, quite close to the barriers there.
Very close.
On the exit, and Hamilton now 2.3 seconds down on Verstappen as he comes into the final corner and out across the line in about 15 seconds time. As Mark says, really long straight on this, or certainly long flat out bit anyway on this Baku circuit. Verstappen quickest, Perez second, Gasly third, Ricciardo fourth, Leclerc fifth, Sainz, Bottas, Norris, Hamilton, Alonso the top 10, Magnussen, Albon, Joe, Tsunoda, Latifi the top 15, and then it is Ocon, Russell, Vettel, Stroll and Schumacher, the 20 drivers. That was straight on has gone Schumacher. I think that's down at turn 2, but has he hit the wall? No.
I got it all up. I have no power.
Yeah, it's a torque protection because of the water pressure. It's okay, so we'll just come in slowly, Mick. Okay, Mick, we need to stop the car.
No, so Schumacher's pulled off the circuit somewhere in the middle sector. Schumacher he's just into the middle sector, so I think he might be parked off at turn 4 or 5, somewhere in that region. Oh no, he's at the castle section, so he's just coming over the top of the castle section, and Schumacher has pulled off now. We're about to get a replay of
water leak.
Yeah, water just pouring.
Oh dear,
just pouring out of the side of the. That ain't a water leak. That's just them put the cap on.
Well, I mean, you joke, but we are so early in the session. Probably his first or second lap out. There's a very high chance that could well be an installation type issue. Very unlikely to have a failure, an actual component failure, unless it's something new and an innovative they're trying. But quite often these cars have been apart, of course, have been fully rebuilt ahead of this session.
Especially Schumacher's.
Yeah.
In fact, is it a different chassis this weekend, I think, from the one in Monaco? I think it might be.
Yeah, I'll be surprised if it wasn't after that impact. So the whole thing's been apart and put back together, and that looks like, I mean, look, these installation laps are partly to discover that sort of thing.
The bouncing doesn't feel nice on the car.
Carlos Sainz saying the bouncing doesn't feel nice in the car, so Ferrari struggling with it as well, which we've seen from Ferrari, the porpoising earlier this year, but it's not seemed to make any impact.
Yeah, or less of an impact
than Mercedes,
Mercedes in terms of the car's performance, but in terms of the violence on the driver, just looking at the onboard from Carlos Sainz, he's really been thrown up and down, really quite brutally, and as I said earlier, going at such speed for such a long period of time, that will start to take a physical toll. We've seen a few drivers already commenting on the physical toll that it might be taking. Just coming to the end of a virtual safety car spell here for the collection of Mick Schumacher's car. But the extended period that they will be suffering this bouncing effect for on the worst affected cars can be, or could be, a genuine issue for drivers. Particularly in a race on Sunday where they're doing this for many, many laps over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty brutal. I remember in the old Formula 2 championship back in the day, they used to race at Portimao, and the Portimao circuit had got really, really bumpy down the start-finish straights, and drivers were saying after a 45-minute race they were having to come in and pop some Nurofen because of the headaches they were getting from this bouncing just down the one straight, and that was in sort of junior Formula cars. So.
And of course the teams can overcome this. There's a relatively simple solution. You can jack the car up, you can raise the ride height to the point where the porpoising or the bouncing becomes much less of an issue, but of course the knock-on effect of that is that you lose performance around the other sections of the racetrack. The corners where you need the downforce, by jacking up the car to overcome the bouncing, you lose the downforce and therefore your overall lap time.
So maybe this is we're a bit away, but will it not be an issue in Monza then, for example, because you've got the long straights, but you're trying to run low downforce?
It's going to be less of an issue in that circuit. You can always factor in your setup depending on the characteristics of the circuit. This is a unique one here, and that we have the very long straight, but we also have an almost Monaco-esque section of this track where you do need the mechanical grip and the downforce. Monza's much more about the high speed, it's much more about the straights. Of course there are corners, but they are less of a factor than they perhaps are here, so you can afford to take a more conservative setup from that mechanical perspective. But look, I think it's an issue, it's a genuine issue with these cars. We kind of foresaw it to some extent. We had the similar types of issues back in the early days of ground effect Formula 1 cars, although they were obviously very different back then. And we're only really starting to see how serious it is, and this might be one of the most extreme cases at this particular track.
Sound you can hear is Max Verstappen coming now towards turn 15, onto the brakes and then through the left-hander and down the hill. Looked fairly sort of steady, to be perfectly honest, through turn 15. He's 1.6 seconds up though on his previous best time. A little bit of a correction on the exit of 16, which is ostensibly the final corner on the circuit. He now goes flat out left, flat out right, and drives towards the line. A bit of flow vids, I think, on the top left of the rear of the rear wing, or the back of the rear wing, I should say. So not a huge amount, but just a little dab as Verstappen comes across the line, and he goes quickest, 1.4 seconds quicker than Fernando Alonso, who had just briefly jumped into second place in the Alpine. Sergio Perez is improving, Charles Leclerc is doing a quick sector 1, so these lap times will drop and drop. Lewis Hamilton, coming into the right-hander, has had a little bit of a moment there. Back end just tried to wiggle away from him a little bit as he came into the right-hander of turn 4.
Lance Stroll clipped the wall there.
Touch the barrier a bit.
Stroll on the exit of 15 has just nerfed the Tech Pro barrier quite, or the what is it you call it, Andrew?
Impact absorbing barrier.
Impact absorbing barrier on the exit.
Other impact absorbing barriers are available.
No, exactly. Well, Paul's just messaged saying other painkillers are available to Nurofen. Apparently, yeah, get some. Oh, and right up to the wall as well goes Sainz. I do love turn 15. They really get up there, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Leclerc is it was Leclerc.
Yeah.
So, and he's 600ths up after the middle sector on Verstappen. He's on the hard tyres, but now he's in this final sector, which is where presumably the Red Bull is going to be pretty strong. Alonso actually has the quickest final sector of anyone. Leclerc now on the hard tyre, so that's not going to affect the final sector much. As he comes across the line, he goes second quickest, 7 tenths down on Verstappen.
The wind is pretty insane.
Copy that, Max.
So the wind is pretty insane, says Verstappen. Leclerc was 8 tenths slower than Verstappen in the final sector alone.
You do get the wind here. It's not a particularly exposed circuit. It's obviously a street circuit in the most part, but you do get channels of wind blowing down these streets, almost like a wind tunnel. And as, of course, we're traversing the city here, you do come out onto a certain part of the circuit when suddenly the wind will affect you in a way that it hasn't on other parts. So Max Verstappen certainly looking like he's experiencing that.
But he's quickest at the moment. Kevin Magnussen coming out, and it's actually let's have a bit of a Mick Schumacher chat, because that's ruined his running in this first session. Gunter Steiner saying in the week, I can't remember the exact quotation, but it's not acceptable for Schumacher to keep crashing. Basically, was the kind of message after the big one in Saudi and the big one in Monaco. Schumacher sort of defended himself, saying, well, no one thought that was going to be an issue, that corner in Saudi, so which I didn't quite understand as a defence. But anyway, what are your thoughts? But then to lose this running here again is bad news for him.
Well, it is, and of course they're in a slight predicament, aren't they, that team, because they are budget restricted. Unlike most teams that are probably up towards the budget cap, they probably aren't. And so, of course, Gunther Steiner can't afford to keep having these repair bills coming in. That's just a genuine fact. That will affect their season. But on a psychological perspective, when your team boss comes out and says, right, you just can't stop crashing, can't keep crashing the car, well, the obvious way to prevent that happening is just to slow down. Yeah. Your driver's going to start going slower, so your results start to suffer. So it's a real kind of dilemma, because at the front of the grid, you probably wouldn't have that kind of... You wouldn't say those kind of things to your driver, because you want them pushing as hard as you can. You want the absolute performance, and if you get the occasional crash, that's one of the costs of that.
The car just died.
Could be.
It switched off the power completely, and then it came back on and restarted the engine. Don't know what that means, but it's obviously off now.
So that's Nicholas Latifi, who's ground to a halt at turn 5 and has pulled off into the runoff area. So a second mechanical moment of the session, this time for Latifi. Virtual safety car is out.
It's been sprayed with a foam fire extinguisher on his brakes. That's a mechanic's nightmare. It's going to get everywhere. I can imagine the guys in the garage watching that shot of the marshal just unloading a foam fire extinguisher on his smoking brakes. It really did. It did exactly what he said. The car just died, then came back on again. So it looked electrical, didn't it?
Well, but I think the dash stayed on. The dash stayed on.
I thought it went off.
Maybe it did. I don't know. But weird one there for Latifi. 43 minutes and 25 seconds to go. Andrew Benson.
So on Mick Schumacher, Jack,
because his qualifying this year has been, it seemed a bit more better.
A bit more better than what? He absolutely mullered Nikita Mazepin last year.
And I think I felt, without looking at the numbers...
Well, shall I give you the numbers?
But what I'm telling you is the feeling in my heart that he's been not too bad compared to Magnussen overall this year.
It depends on how you define not too bad and how you regard Kevin Magnussen as a benchmark, doesn't it? Now, put this.
Well, Magnussen was beaten by Palmer, so let's put that in as a...
Presumably not listening. Well, he was beaten by Palmer in one half of the season they were together. He beat Palmer in the other half of the season. But anyway,
broadly, Magnussen is decent. I think that's fair to say.
I think this is the point. Magnussen is decent, but Mick Schumacher is the son of the second greatest Formula 1 driver statistically of all time. And he's in Formula 1. He's been paid for by Ferrari, who brought him in to see whether he was going to be good enough to do the job and be in their car at some point in the future. And unfortunately for him, this season is not going well. It's one thing to beat Nikita Mazepin, but if you're going to be a future Ferrari driver, you've definitely got to beat Kevin Magnussen. And that's no disrespect to Kevin Magnussen. I like him as a person, I rate him as a driver, but he's not A-list. He's not Leclerc or Hamilton or Verstappen. And so far this year, Magnussen is 5.2 ahead in qualifying at an average of 0.22 seconds. Okay, he's in his second season, and that's not bad. But if that was Charles Leclerc, do you think it'd be the same stats? I don't think so.
Well, but and where I'm gonna, and I might be getting some hating coming on #BBCF1. Has anyone ever really seen evidence from Schumacher that he's going? So this is what. So have Ferrari put him in to see if he can be a Ferrari driver? Really,
they
honestly,
actually said that. Otherwise, why is he there? Why are they paying for him?
Yeah, but they're not
going to. All right, put it this way: they're not going to keep paying for him in Formula 1 if he carries on performing at this level. Just like they didn't keep paying for Antonio Giovinazzi. Well, they are actually paying for Antonio Giovinazzi because he's a reserve driver. He does a lot of simulator work. But if Schumacher carries on at this performance level, that's where his career is going in Formula 1. It's certainly not going into a front-running team.
Well, there's one thing paying Giovinazzi a couple of $100K to be a sim driver and paying for a seat in Formula 1. There's a huge difference there.
If you think about the alternative side of this, the Red Bull version of their young driver program, people often criticise them for being so brutal, don't they? They cutthroat, they don't give people too many years of an opportunity before they make their mind up, get rid of them and bring the next guy in. And what they're looking for is the next Max Verstappen. It's the next Sebastian Vettel. They found the next Vettel with Max Verstappen, of course. Yeah. Now they're looking for the next version of that. So if that's your ultimate goal, if that's the only thing that really matters to you, ultimate success, which this is Formula 1, it's the pinnacle of the industry. For me, Red Bull's not too far away from doing things the right way. They've got to get to the next Max Verstappen before Max Verstappen eventually comes to the end of his career. They've got to have a succession plan in place, and Ferrari are exactly the same. Leclerc looks like, you know, a perfect candidate for leading that team right now. But what happens next, and who comes alongside him to build the perfect team? I don't think it's going to be Schumacher.
But I guess my point is, it was never going to be Schumacher, but maybe I'm being a bit too flippant and with that, I don't know.
Because of his past results.
Yeah, because to me there's no real evidence that he was ever sort of standout in the way that there was with Leclerc, there was with Russell, there was with Hamilton. I didn't know if there was with Alonso. He won that Formula World Series by Nissan thing, but that was sort of it. But you know, perhaps most of the drivers on the grid, you do have that. And I don't disagree with you about Red Bull. I think that certainly that they could have done things differently in terms of the way they sort of literally treated the drivers as people. Yeah. But I think as in terms of the decision-making process, I don't think there's many you can say that. And obviously, I work with in Formula E. There's a lot of ex-Red Bull gang there. Yeah. And I don't disagree with any of Red Bull's decision-making processes. The way they treated the drivers, sort of as people, maybe is a bit questionable at times.
I'd agree with that.
But in principle, the way the system operates and what you're looking for, I agree. I think that's
perhaps
the way to go.
With Schumacher, there is an argument to say it's a special case because of who his dad is. And normally I wouldn't make that case, but in their case, it's a very personal connection they have with the Schumacher family. And perhaps there's a little bit of extra leeway or a little bit of extra support being given. It won't last forever. It will get you to a certain level, but then the driver, of course, has to step up and do the rest himself. Maybe that's why he's been given this opportunity to some extent. But it's up to him now to make the most of it. And I think it's fair to say that your benchmark is your teammate. And as Andrew said, the numbers don't stack particularly favourable for him at the moment. Favourably.
Kirk says, Benson said that Mazepin was mullered, but he did not point out that other yogurts were available. so there we go. But I then wondered, apparently, because I wondered what is the etymology of mullered, and apparently it's potentially a variant form of an older regional verb mull, as in to grind or powder or pulverize or crumble. Apparently that's what happens when you mull something, potentially in the olden days.
Every day's a school day.
Exactly. Right, Daniel Eckersley said Mick Schumacher has a great future ahead of him with Ferrari in the World Endurance Championship, which I think is a reasonable observation. 37 minutes and 25 seconds on the clock. This virtual safety car has ended now. They've cleared Latifi's car, so we are getting some running, and Verstappen is coming across the line to do a 1 minute 46.477, which is a tenth of a second, or just under a tenth quicker than his teammate Sergio Perez. Leclerc across the line does a 48.7, so 1.7 seconds slower than he managed previously, but he's only half a second away from Verstappen from his previous best lap. Yuki Tsunoda jumps up into 5th position. Gasly is 4th. That's a reasonable first effort from Tsunoda, who's been in the wars a little here in the past. The wars and the walls. I think he had a moment at turn 4 one year, and then was it last year in qualifying? He just steamed into the barrier at turn 3, right at the end. Yeah. The Red Bull DRS flap looks like it's doing that bendy thing that it was doing last year in Qatar and Saudi at the end of last season.
I noticed that earlier. It's really oscillating as it comes along that really long straight, and again, that won't take that punishment for too long, so I'm sure the Red Bull team are looking at it. But look, at the moment, early signs are looking quite good for the Red Bull family, aren't they? The two main cars, that's Verstappen and Perez, currently quickest, with Leclerc stuck in 3rd, but then it's the two sister cars, if you like, the Alpha Tauris of Gasly and Tsunoda. So that Red Bull power plants, the Red Bull aerodynamics, all looking to suit this circuit in the early phases, which I guess is what we'd expect. The top speed, as we talked about earlier, being a real strength here. I mean, I've got a question. Let's talk about Gasly. With the signing of Sergio Perez on a 2-year contract at Red Bull, which was probably a seat that Gasly will have at least had hopes to fill himself at some point. That's now taken. What does Gasly do over the future? What's his next move?
That's a good question. It's a very good question. Because
he needs to find, if he wants the job at the front of the grid, he needs to find a team that's prepared to give it to him that isn't Red Bull, because they're not going to. That's
Agreed.
the bottom line.
But Mercedes or Ferrari aren't
no one
gonna...
else is going to either, is his problem. Yeah.
So where do you think? Because there's an obvious move to Alpine, right? That you'd say that might be one that could potentially be on the cards over the next year or so, potentially. But
they've not got room now, have they? They're going to probably keep Alonso for at least another year, and they've got Piastri.
And they've got Piastri, so that's the other blocking point there. So what about McLaren?
And Ocon on an 8-year deal.
Yes, well, another 2 years after this one, isn't it? Yeah.
What about McLaren then? If we look to a future at McLaren without Daniel Ricciardo, perhaps at some point,
and dropping Ricciardo and bringing in Gasly.
I think the problem is that the problem Gasly's going to have with trying to find a top drive is he didn't acquit himself very well at Red Bull the first time around. Now it was only his second year, and there are question marks about, Alex Albon also had a problem there, and other people have had problems against Max Verstappen. Ricciardo in the end left because of Red Bull, what he perceived to be Red Bull's favouritism towards Verstappen. But
I was on that. I was speaking to someone who used to work at and there were points where if Verstappen had a crash, they'd be like, right, we got to start taking apart Albon's car because we're going to need the bits off it. It was that Verstappen is number one.
It's really interesting. I hadn't heard that before, though. It doesn't surprise me. But if you look at the top 4 teams in Formula One at the moment, you've got Red Bull with Verstappen. He's committed there for a number of years. You've got Ferrari with Leclerc. He's committed there for a number of years, and he's obviously going to be in demand as the years in the future. Whether Ferrari want to keep him, which I'm sure they will, or whether he wants to move somewhere else, people are going to want him. Mercedes have got Hamilton at the moment. He's obviously coming towards the end of his career eventually, but they've got Russell as their next guy. McLaren have got Lando Norris as their next guy. Alpine are the first team in terms of the pecking order that have potential ambitions to be at the top of Formula One, who don't have a recognised, what I would describe as a recognised A-lister under contract as the guy they're committed to for the future already. So that's Gasly's main option, I would think. But you've turned that around. The question becomes, do the teams want Gasly? Those calibre of teams, do they want Gasly? And I'm not sure that he would be their first choice if they were looking for that kind of driver.
So how about this then? What about the option of staying at AlphaTauri in an era of Formula One now that shrinks the advantage that the big teams have because of massive budget? If you say AlphaTauri are going to be close to that budget cap perhaps, and now so are Red Bull. Yes, they've got perhaps stronger workforce, better facilities and all the things that we know they have, but now it's a much more equitable Formula One, right? So is it actually such a bad place to be at AlphaTauri over the next couple of years?
I think it's solid. I think Gasly, I feel, is now this sort of Trulli, Fisichella, a Lacey kind of vibe of absolutely good driver. Are the top teams going to hire him to win a championship? No, but as a midfield team, going to be like, yeah, we'll hire Gasly. He's pretty good.
I feel like he's stronger than that.
Yeah,
I feel like he's better than that category of people. I know he hasn't always, and I think consistency perhaps is his problem because he hasn't done it consistently enough.
Based on what? What are you basing this on?
Well, I think we've had some really strong performances. I mean, the win obviously was a solid moment, but I think we've had some really strong performances when the car's worked. The car's been very hit and miss. And
beating Tsunoda in his 4th year of car racing.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying it's perfect, and I think he's let himself down, or seemingly the results have let him down in more recent times. But I think if you'd asked us this same question last year, I think you'd have put him higher than a Fisichella type driver, would you not? Or would you not?
I don't know. I don't know.
By the look on your face.
I know. I don't know if I think maybe Fisichella was a bit of a Lacey kind of vibe. Yeah. I don't know. I get a Lacey kind of vibe from Gazzo. I don't know. 31 minutes and 4 seconds on the clock. It's a very interesting one because there is that sort of question of career progression these days, and you just get a bit less swapping around from the big drivers. You think of the olden times where Mansell drove for Williams and for Ferrari, and Senna drove for Williams and McLaren, but all while they were at the front of the field, and Prost drove for Williams and McLaren and Ferrari.
It's pretty shocking. I've never felt that much bottoming.
And just for your feedback, very much we can see the ride is poor, but there's a lot of cars with a lot of bouncing down there.
Gasly's never felt that much bottoming.
Not sure just hearing that everyone else is suffering actually makes it feel any better.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a really interesting question about Gasly.
I think we were just hearing, that was Gasly, of course, talking to his engineer about the bottoming on his car, and I do think this could well grow into a bigger issue this weekend. But in terms of the health and well-being of drivers, and this is pretty violent stuff we're seeing now, as I said, for an extended period of time. And when you come to a Grand Prix on Sunday, that's a lot of being battered around inside the cockpit of your car. So I'm not sure what the answer is, of course, because no one wants to compromise performance. It's finding a balance, and that's what these sessions are all about. It's finding the balance between getting comfortable and getting the right performance level.
Drivers returning to the pits now with 29 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock. Verstappen quickest, Perez second, Leclerc third, Gasly fourth, Tsunoda fifth, 1.4 seconds covering all of those. There's nothing between Verstappen and Perez, then half a second back to Leclerc. Sainz, Magnussen, Alonso, Albon and Ocon are the top 10. And then Hamilton, Ricciardo, Russell, Norris, Vettel the top 15, Bottas, Stroll, Latifi, Zhou and Schumacher the 20 drivers. Gasly has just gone wide at turn 16 at the bottom of the hill. That brings him out onto the start-finish straight. 29 minutes on the clock. Most drivers have returned to the pit lane, but Daniel Ricciardo is on a set of soft tyres on an outlap coming into turn 1 through the left-hander, and Ricciardo, I felt, sort of got a bit of a vote of confidence, the sort of manager's vote of confidence a little bit this week, and then saying he's not, being complacent because McLaren are backing him. But we've discussed Ricciardo many times over the last year or so, and he gets on the brakes into turn 3. We'll see what he can do in Baku.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I think a potential opportunity for McLaren. It's going to be a tricky one, as it is for everybody. And these sessions are all about, because this circuit's so different in terms of the characteristics at different elements around the track, this session is all about finding the compromise in your car's setup to suit both of those, because the top speed, of course, is what's going to really assist you, not just in terms of lap time, but on race day especially. You can't afford to be a sitting duck down that long straight, and you want to have the opportunity to overtake. So that comes with low downforce, low drag and top speed, but the rest of the lap is all about needing that mechanical grip and the high downforce setup that you might choose for somewhere like Monaco. So this is about fine-tuning that compromise between the two, and it's not always going to be the setup that gives you the best lap time that means it'll be the best race car. Perhaps this is what we're looking at when we talk about Red Bull. It may be that Ferrari have a slightly better lap time on Saturday in the closing moments of qualifying. We'll have to wait and see. But on Sunday, that top speed could be the thing that really enables you to move forward in the race.
Lance Stroll, I think, might be in the wall on the exit of 4, or no, just gone straight on in the runoff area. He's managed to get going again, so he must have gone straight on in that runoff area at turn 4. I thought he was at 5, and I think that's why. 6. That's why I thought he might be in the wall, but he wasn't, so it doesn't matter. Alonso goes up into 7th place in the Alpine. Less than 27 minutes on the clock now. Valtteri Bottas is the and Max Verstappen is fastest. The championship leader is 700ths quicker than Sergio Perez. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari is about half a second back, but he's on the hard tyres. They're all going out on some soft tyres now, so we'll get a bit more meaningful running. Mercedes, Hamilton and Russell currently down in 13th and 14th position. As you say, full commentary on the BBC Sport website. And Stroll just kind of went straight on at turn 4 and then carried on his way.
Similar issue to the one that Lewis Hamilton had at the same corner a little bit earlier on. The wind does look like it's catching a couple of people out, I have to say, right at the bottom of the hill before they turn left and head back up towards the start-finish straight. So Ricciardo suffering with some massive understeer in his McLaren. Gasly also running wide, it just looking like the front end washing out as he hit this, what seemed like a gust of wind. So that might be the sort of thing that Max Verstappen was reporting earlier. Something you have to get used to and get the heads around, because you can't do much about it.
So Verstappen's done an outlap on these soft tyres. He's now done a lap at 2 minutes 3 seconds. That rear wing is really going for it, isn't it? It's not quite as bad. It's sort of, that bit where it kind of opens and then opens a little bit too much. It's not quite as bad as Qatar last year, but it is getting on the wobble side. So Verstappen's done an out lap, then a prep lap, and now he is on a push lap by the looks of things, coming down towards turn 3. That rear wing flapping around a lot.
I'd be amazed if that would survive a Grand Prix distance. It's oscillating so violently that it looks like it's going to shake itself to bits. And it's not only the flex in the wing and the aerodynamic oscillation, but also, of course, the car is bouncing, as we know, down the straight. So if those two oscillations kind of are in tune with each other, it can really exacerbate the problem and make it much worse. And that looks like that's what's happening.
Verstappen is 6/10 up in the first sector, and now into the middle sector as he flashes through the left-hander of turn 8 past the castle and then round the highest point on the circuit, round the Old Town. And obviously there's quite a lot of track evolution on this circuit too, with it being a normal street circuit during the rest of the year, basically. Onto the brakes, into the left-hander of 15, then down into 16. We'll get his middle sector split now on the soft tyres. Max Verstappen, he's 7/10 up, so he's only found a 10th to himself in the middle sector, which is a bit of a surprise as he now comes out towards the line. Down you can hear is the Red Bull, the Honda engine in the back of it. Tsunoda's gone out on the soft tyres. Sainz has just left the pits on the soft tyre. Perez is doing an out lap. We'll see whether he does a prep lap as well. And Leclerc is still in the pits. Verstappen goes 6/10 quicker, so he loses a bit of time in the final sector, but the final sector is just one corner, so that might be anything really that affects the sort of straight line speed there.
Well, it really looks like that final corner is where a lot of them are suffering, actually, and if it is due to wind, gusts of wind, it looks like understeer affecting quite a lot of cars in that section. I was getting another replay of that rear wing DRS flap.
The wind on the main straight is insane.
Copy that.
So he's saying the wind on the main straight is insane. Well, maybe he's feeling like the buffeting from the DRS flapping and thinks it's wind or something. I don't know. According to this, it's 1.7 meters per second, sort of a headwind into the first corner, and that's sort of it. So that's not a particularly quick wind, 1.7 meters per second.
Well, it is called the City of Winds, isn't it? Maybe it's windier than...
I thought it was the City of Fire.
No.
Is it not? They're not the Flame City or something? I'm sure it is. That's why they have the big flames.
Let's look it up. Do your Googling thing.
Yeah.
Other internet search engines are available.
Yeah, but I'm not going to ask Jeeves what the Baku's called.
No, there are actually other internet search engines now, as opposed to 20 years ago.
Baku, City of Winds.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Don't doubt me, Jack.
It's an unofficial literary name for Baku. But I'm sure it's the City of Fire as well. Baku, City of Fire.
Oh, there we go. You can get whatever you want. Call it whatever you like.
City
Maybe
of Earth too, maybe.
But that's why the flame towers are flames.
Well, there's actually a flame, isn't there, that comes out of the ground somewhere nearby.
Yanardach.
Yeah.
A burning mountain.
Yeah.
It's on a hillside in the Abasheron Peninsula on the Caspian Sea near Baku.
And whilst you two were talking about that, Lando Norris just popped up in 6th on his soft tyre run, still 1.8 seconds off, so a long way back really from the leaders. But we've got a nice onboard shot, driver's eye view shot on Lando Norris, and that bouncing really must be very hard to take from a driver's perspective. You see his helmet just rattling around, must be creating blurred vision, you'd imagine.
21 minutes and 34 seconds to go. Sergio Perez has just done the fastest first sector of anyone, a quarter of a second faster than Verstappen. Sainz is on a lap 2. He's coming through the castle now, up towards the top of the hill, and then down towards turn 15. His first sector, Carlos Sainz, is 4/10 down on Sergio Perez. They're both on the soft tyres. Booey, right up to the wall goes Sainz on the exit of the left-hander, and he's only 300ths down on Verstappen after the middle sector, so he's found a bit of time in that middle part of the lap.
It's this bit where he's going to lose out, surely, along the long run down towards the start-finish line.
Perez goes a couple of tenths slower than Sainz in the middle sector, but still a couple of tenths up on Verstappen overall. So this is going to be an interesting fight between Sainz and Perez. Leclerc is on his out lap now. He's just coming through the middle sector. Sainz doesn't beat Verstappen, slots into second place 2 tenths away, so lost 4 tenths to Verstappen in the final sector. Sergio Perez, race winner from last time out in Monaco, quickest, a 1 minute 45.476, 3 tenths quicker than Verstappen, half a second quicker than Sainz.
It's
good stuff from Perez.
Yeah, resurgent Sergio Perez, isn't it? I mean, the contract extension always helps with mindset and the way you feel about your driving life and your life behind the wheel. And I think we're seeing an example of that happening. I mean, he's a great driver, Sergio Perez, but does he now pose a potential problem for Red Bull in that if he is going to potentially start taking points off Max Verstappen, do they have to start making some difficult calls about a team leader type situation?
I think they've already made them, haven't they?
Would they be difficult calls?
Well, I mean, yeah,
Red Bull.
Okay, but what if Sergio is genuinely just quicker? I mean, are they going to go all out and sacrifice him to get Max to the front, or are they going to prioritise their fastest driver?
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question now, Mark. What percentage chance do you think there's going to be of Sergio Perez being definitively quicker than Max Verstappen on a regular basis?
Yeah, okay. I mean, yes, okay, I take your point, but last time out in Monaco, and I know the caveats that it's a very different type of circuit, he was genuinely quicker. I mean, Max could not live with Sergio Perez. I know we're very early days here, but Sergio just put in a lap that's 3 tenths quicker. Even if he's not quicker, he looks like he's definitely up there and in the mix with Max. If it comes to Saturday and moving into Sunday, and Sergio is the quicker driver, I mean, as a team, do you not prioritise your quicker driver?
I'm sure I saw some comments from Helmut Marko earlier this week, reported comments, I should say, where he's basically saying there's not a problem because Verstappen's is our guy. I'm paraphrasing. It wasn't exactly those words, but and I think.
Don't get me wrong. I think I know the answer. I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
They're not going to stop backing Verstappen, are they? Let's be honest.
I don't think so.
They're just not. I tell you what, though, what has been what struck me over the course of this session so far is to see Charles Leclerc not on a particularly quick lap and getting traffic from a Mercedes actually into the second last corner. Is that Ferrari have got some difficult decisions to make overnight, I think. They're losing, as we've been seeing, 4 to 5 tenths going up the straight in the last sector, but the lap times are sort of in the right ballpark. I don't think they can go into the Grand Prix with that setup on that car.
No,
because they're going to lose if they do.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. There are different ways of generating a very similar lap time, and that's what we're seeing between the two teams, but only one of those ways is going to benefit you when the points are dished out on Sunday, and that is being fast down this incredibly long straight so that you can overtake and you can prevent yourself being overtaken. So if that means compromising their overall lap time in terms of the setup of the car through the twisty bits, maybe that is what they have to start thinking more about.
But surely Ferrari knew this already.
Well, they do, but
they knew this already, and then they're coming here. Everybody's talking about their straight line disadvantage. Why would they whack a load of downforce on?
Well, that's true. But as both the drivers were talking about this before, there is a compromise here between, as Mark says, it's all relative speaking. Obviously, it's all a generally low downforce setup, but you can still favour the corners a bit more to generate a lap time, or you can favour the straight a bit more to generate the lap time, and that can give you more or less the same lap time. But you might feel that the more downforce setup is better for your car because of a whole load of other reasons to do with, for example, tyre wear.
Yeah.
Which might be why they've thought, well, this is our best compromise, we think, going into first practice. I mean, they may well, who knows what they're going to end up with on Saturday. And it may well be that they can't come away from this setup because the tyre wear is a problem, and, they're just going to have to accept that they're going to be behind Red Bull.
It's not necessarily just a choice. It's not just a choice that you decide, right, I'm going to go, high speed, low downforce, or slower speed and high downforce. You don't just make that choice because your car has inherent strengths and weaknesses. And so what Andrew's saying there is it's not just a case of Ferrari just being able to take all the downforce and therefore the drag off to match the likes of Red Bull, because they might lose out a lot more than Red Bull would in the twisty bits because of the way that their car behaves. And that's the problem they're suffering with here. They've got two very different inherent cars generating similar lap times but in completely different ways, and at some circuits it will suit Ferrari. That's why Monaco was such a blow, because that was one of their biggest opportunities to just take home 4 points, and they didn't do it. this looks like, and has looked like even long before we came here, a Red Bull circuit. Ferrari have to try and do something, because as Andrew says, even if they can generate a lap time that's close with this slower speed down the straights, they'll go backwards in the race, or at least there's no chance.
They can't win, is what I'm saying.
Okay,
with that setup.
Because you're sort of going
on the evidence of today.
But you're sort of going around in circles here, saying that it's a compromise, it's not as simple as that. But then you both end up saying, well, but actually they just need to take all the downforce off.
Well, they need to try something. They need to try something, because if this is what we've got, if we look at the timesheets now, 2 Red Bulls out front with 2 Ferraris behind them, but 3 or 4 tenths back. That's not going to win them the race. They can either decide, okay, well, 3rd and 4th is as good as we can get out of this weekend, given the nature of the circuit, or we could experiment. We've got 2 more practice sessions. We try a very different setup and see what it does. And I'm sure that's what they're discussing internally right now.
Yeah. I just can't quite work out why it's a surprise.
It's not a surprise. I'm just making the point that Ferrari are in a very difficult place on the evidence of this session so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just stay in the middle, so...
Copy, we've seen that.
It's Leclerc complaining about Russell in the Mercedes getting in his way. Perez and Verstappen return to the pits. Leclerc's doing another lap here in the Ferrari, coming through the middle sector now.
The other challenge, of course, that both of these teams and everybody will be facing is not just about your outright speed or your outright lap time, but of course, as Andrew said, tyre wear not such an issue here, but tyre temperature a real balancing act, because you have this long straight where everything cools down so much. In that sector, you get into the sector 1 off the start-finish straight, the heavy braking zone where you really need the tyre temperature, but you've lost it all along the long straight. And then you go through the tight and twisty bits of the city centre where you really need tyre temperature. So managing that, and the downforce levels, of course, really enable you or help you to build that tyre temperature. So there are a lot of other factors that come into play here. It's not just about the speed or the straight line speed, but managing tyres, managing efficiency, all of those kind of things, really a big part of that decision-making process too.
Leclerc goes second quickest. A 1 minute 45.603, a tenth slower than Perez, 2 tenths quicker than Verstappen, and 4 tenths quicker than his teammate Carlos Sainz. That was his second run on those soft tyres. Perez and Verstappen both came back into the pits, and Hamilton is on a lap. He's improving at the moment. He's in 6th place, Hamilton, but he's done a personal best in the middle sector, half a second slower than Leclerc has managed in the middle sector, but actually the same as Perez's middle sector, I think, or on that last lap anyway, actually. So Perez was losing a bit of time. Just getting a replay of Hamilton down into turn 1.
You just need to be careful when you're completing the lap, going 4 wheels across that pit entry line.
Yeah, so bumpy I couldn't see the line.
Okay, copy.
So Hamilton's saying it's so bumpy I couldn't see the line there at the pit entry.
It's because the fastest route along that straight is to take a sort of diagonal, a sort of straight line diagonal path from the point where you exit the straight, which is on the left-hand side, to gradually getting over, of course, to the right-hand side for turn 1. And it's easy to cross over the pit lane entry line, and if you do that in the race with all 4 wheels to the left of that pit entry line, you either have to go into the pits or you face a penalty. So that's Lewis just being reminded of that.
Hamilton went 6th quickest, 1.1 seconds back from Sergio Perez, and Sainz is on another lap now, coming into turn 15. Up to 180 miles an hour before going down from 7th gear to 3rd gear, through the left, right up to the wall on the exit. After the middle sector, he is less than a tenth away from Sergio Perez. Has a couple of goes getting it turned in and is a bit loose on the way out, Carlos Sainz, and now drives towards the line. He might chip away a bit at his time. I'd be surprised if he's able to get ahead of Verstappen. The porpoising starts there as he comes... Oh, it's brutal. As he comes through the final flat-out right-hander. You can hear it as well. And he comes to the line now. Carlos Sainz, where does he go? He remains in 4th place. Doesn't actually find time in the final sector. Goes 200ths slower than he managed previously. So Perez quickest, Leclerc 2nd, Verstappen 3rd, Sainz 4th. Hamilton, Gasly, Tsunoda, Russell, Alonso, Norris the top 10. Magnussen, Vettel, Zhou, Albon, Ocon the top 15. Stroll, Bottas, Ricciardo, the 18 drivers. Ricciardo 3.3 seconds away, 1.1 seconds of his teammate, so maybe he hasn't had a run yet on the... No, he has been out on the soft tyres, but maybe not hooked the lap up. And Latifi and Schumacher both out of the session with mechanical issues early on. A water leak for Mick Schumacher and the car just turning off for Nicholas Latifi. 10 minutes and 26 seconds on the clock.
Yeah, very interesting. It's really interesting being on board with Carlos Sainz there. As he opened the DRS flap, you get a very clear indication of the moment you cross the DRS line and the flap opens and you ditch some of that downforce and drag, the porpoising stops, or it eases off momentarily, and then you increase the speed again, and that aerodynamic drag or aerodynamic downforce builds and the porpoising increases. So a real kind of indicator of there exactly what the DRS flap does in terms of dumping downforce in an instant.
One thing I meant to ask earlier about Perez, 2-year deal. Interesting, notable, surprising, not really, when Bottas was always getting 1-year deals as a comparison.
But it feels to me like it's not a difficult decision. It feels like Perez is the obvious candidate. He's solid, he seems dependable, he's got a grip of this particular car. And don't forget, we're moving into an era of this sport where the cars are very different. It's not like in the previous era where everything had been centred around Verstappen. The design had evolved to really suit him, and so it's often a real difficult challenge. And that design, by the way, was very different to a lot of other cars. So a lot of those drivers that had come in as his teammate in the past had struggled to get to grips with that unique Red Bull characteristic. Well, now we've got a very different car. We're at the beginning of a development cycle. Perez can now grow with that as they evolve over the next few years. So it feels to me like it's a no-brainer. You've got a guy who's solid, he's quick, it seems like an incredibly nice guy. He'll do what the team need him to do in whatever form that takes, and he can evolve with the team as they move through this new era.
Andrew, any thoughts on a 2-year deal? Were you a bit surprised, or?
Not much surprise to me about that. No, it makes sense. Mark's right. It's for Red Bull, they found finally. It's not what they wanted. They wanted it to all come through the Red Bull driver program, obviously, but they found what they find it like a harmonious driver pairing. They've got a driver with Verstappen who's close enough to do the job of a number 1.5 stroke number 2, whatever you want to call him, but basically does what he's told at the same time and doesn't make too much fuss about it. So why wouldn't they sign him for 2 years?
Do Red Bull have 2 drivers now who didn't come through their young driver program in their top team?
Basically, yeah.
Ironic.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, the Red Bull driver program, or any young driver program, is there to increase the chances of finding your next talent early. But it shouldn't be the only way you find your talent, because if the ultimate goal is just to have the best 2 drivers in your car at any given moment, you've got to be open enough to take them from anywhere. So, look, the results are kind of paying dividends, aren't they?
Russell goes 7th quickest, 1.2 seconds slower than Sergio Perez, 9,000th slower than Yuki Tsunoda, who's 6th quickest, who in turn is 100th slower than Lewis Hamilton, who's 5th quickest. Lance Stroll on the medium tyres jumps up into 11th position. Perez is still quickest with Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz and Hamilton, the top 5, which is probably how it will remain. Tsunoda, Russell, Gasly, Alonso, Norris, the top 10. Stroll, Magnussen, Vettel, Joe, Bottas, the top 15. Albon, Ocon, Ricciardo, Latifi, Schumacher, the 20 drivers. Hamilton is not pushing on this lap.
You need to remove this beeping in track 1, man. Crazy.
Okay, copy. We'll box.
What Lewis is talking about there is the Strat is one of the rotary dials on the steering wheel, changes the strategy. It's short for strategy, of course, in that terms of power unit strategy, and the driver gets little tones in his earpieces, little beeps.
So chassis people 91, chassis people 91 to stop the beeps. That'll disable them all.
And so those little beeps will be referring to various engine parameters. You get them sometimes to give you an indication of when to upshift, the tone for your DRS opening, those kind of things, and Lewis is clearly finding that annoying. What I always used to find hilarious, the message you just heard his engineer relay to him there, is to change a couple of settings to disable that beep. And it was something like engine mode 94, I think was the message there. I used to find it hilarious that sometimes the drivers would have to go through a multitude of stages to get to the spot in the software to turn something on or off. And I imagine trying to do that at 200 miles an hour, and it was like to get to sort of Strat 94, you'd have a button for the 10s, so you'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then on the other finger it would be the single digits, the 1, 2, 3, 4. And imagine trying to do that whilst doing everything else in a Formula 1 car.
It sounds like trying to set the clock on your oven.
Exactly.
One of those things. You've got a couple of buttons and a couple of wheels, and you've got to work out how you're meant to do it and how to get into that clock mode.
Yeah, exactly that.
You can have that one. 5 minutes, 15 seconds to go. 15 years ago today, Lewis Hamilton's first Formula 1 victory.
Oh, I remember it well. Well, I don't remember it that well because it took me ages to recall what you're talking about. But what were you were there, right? Yeah, I was there. Yeah, it had felt like it was coming for quite a while. We'd had a Monaco actually before that, because it came, of course, in Canada. But we'd had a Monaco where Lewis, for the first time, had been genuinely quicker than Fernando, and the relationship was starting to break down because Lewis realised he was a genuine contender here up against the current world champion of Fernando Alonso. And yeah, he got to Canada and he really strung our whole weekend together almost flawlessly. And that was an amazing moment, really, when you look back on it, considering what he's gone on to achieve since.
Were you dangling over the pit wall? Were you one of them?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, as you could see it growing. This guy was building in the team. The furore around him was growing. Obviously, our team at the time had a huge number of controversies going on with drivers fighting and Spygate bubbling away in the background and all sorts of things just starting to develop. So it was a big release of emotion, I think, that weekend. So yeah, it was a great day.
I can't remember who I was talking about this with recently. It was someone. Obviously, I'm just talking to myself. Don't do that quite so much anymore. But the mechanics hanging off the pit wall thing, it feels a bit sketchy sometimes. The older I get, the more I look at it and think, this is a bit of a health and safety nightmare.
Well,
you got to be, because you're like clinging on with one hand and just dangling in front of the car at 200 miles an hour. You can't be slipping there.
No, and actually, that's a good point. Somebody flagged a picture to me recently on one of the social channels of that happening in a recent race. And I mean, it is banned. That's banned. And during my time, it was banned. It was actually banned to start climbing onto the pit wall. So you could be at the fence, but you're not allowed to climb onto the pit wall. It seems like it's still banned, but that's just crept back in and not being policed.
I didn't know it was banned.
Yeah, there was because we used to do it all the time.
Yeah,
and it was crazy at times. But so they actually banned it. It just feels like that's not being policed anymore. But you're right, it's dangerous. It is dangerous and surprising in this day and age that we let it happen. To be fair,
the FIA not policing something, Andrew Benson.
Come on, we're nearly at the end of the show. You can't ask that question.
No,
now.
exactly. Rules are rules. 2 minutes and 45 seconds to go. Yellow flag in the middle sector. Oh, at 15. There's someone in the wall at 15. It might be an Alpha Tauri in the final couple of corners. It's not Sonoda because he's just made his way out of the pit lane. Track's clear now, so it was Gasly. Went straight on at turn 15 and then he carried on his merry way down into turn 16. So
yeah, just after a purple mini sector by the look of it for Gasly.
Yeah.
Was that Gasly?
Yeah, it was, because he didn't brake probably for the corner, so got the little purple mini sector in. 2 minutes and 13 seconds on the clock. Bottas coming through that left-hander at 15 and starting to drop down the hill. Perez quickest, Leclerc second, Verstappen third, Sainz fourth, Hamilton fifth, Sonoda, Russell, Alonso, Gasly, Ocon the top 10, Norris, Stroll, Magnussen, Vettel, Joe the top 15, and then Bottas, Albon and Ricciardo, the 18 drivers to have set a lap time. Then Latifi and Schumacher both breaking down. Bottas is improving on this lap. Here comes the Mercedes driver, the former Mercedes driver to the line in the Alfa Romeo. Did he get a win here, Bottas?
Yes,
he did, didn't he? Yeah.
He also holds the record for the fastest ever Formula 1 top speed, I believe, in his Williams along this start-finish straight. 378 kilometres an hour.
Very good. They were huge double front lockup for Pierre Gasly down at 15.
You okay, Pierre?
Yeah, I'm okay. I just like the front.
That's why he got his purple mini set, so he just went in way too quickly.
And then did a very nice job of doing a sort of a Bottas-y spin turn. Not quite as instantaneous as Bottas, but reasonable nevertheless from Gasly. Russell is back in the pits, everybody else out on circuit. Or Hamilton's just done left the pits on an outlap, so Russell might do the same to go and do some practice starts. But Latifi and Schumacher not setting lap times. So First blood to Red Bull then. Sergio Perez a 10th ahead of Leclerc. We've got 40 seconds left on the clock, and I don't think we'll see any more times coming in. Leclerc and Sainz both going back onto the hard tyres for the remainder of this session. Just getting a look at Perez coming through the right-hander of turn 4. And nothing really happened. So now up at the castle section, I think we're just getting a little montage of Perez driving around. So I thought maybe there would have been a drama, but not yet for Sergio Perez, or not so far today. No. Of course, winner here in the past for Red Bull, winner of the last Grand Prix in Monaco as well, and on a decent run of form. Oh, he brushed the Tech Pro right on the exit of turn 15. Checker flag falls, Perez takes it and ends the session quickest. A 1 minute 45.476 for Perez, a 10th ahead of Leclerc, 3/10 ahead of Max Verstappen, half a second ahead of Sainz, and then there's that classic 6/10 gap back to Hamilton in 5th, Tsunoda 6th, Russell 7th, Alonso 8th, Gasly 9th, Ocon 10th, Norris, Stroll, Magnussen, Vettel, Bottas the top 15, Joe, Albon, Ricciardo, the 18 drivers to set a lap time. Latifi and Schumacher broke down. First blood to Red Bull then, and to Perez. Man's on form.
He is on form. Perhaps no surprise that first blood has gone to Red Bull. I think this, as you said earlier, this circuit we thought would suit them. The characteristics of their car really suiting the long, fast, high-speed straight here. So work for Ferrari to do, but they are not a million miles away. Leclerc just over a 10th back. That's achievable, but as we discussed earlier, this circuit and the setting up ready for this circuit really has to favour race day much more than it favours qualifying. So those will be the discussions happening up and down the pit lane in the debriefs following this session.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, okay, so Nathan has helped me out, saying Azerbaijan is the land of fire, not Baku in particular. So Baku, I think, is the city of wind. Oh, and a moment for Verstappen. I think he's just had a moment at turn 15. Was he pushing Verstappen? Alonso's still pushing, actually. He might jump up the order here, and I might have to reread the order. And he does. He goes fifth quickest, Fernando Alonso. So Perez, Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz, Alonso is the top 5 at the end of the day, at the end of the morning. Well, at the end of the afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. Then Hamilton, Tsunoda, Russell, Gasly and Ocon the top 10. So Alonso doing a nice lap in there at the end. Verstappen, meanwhile, came into the right-hander of 15, got on the brakes where Gasly had gone straight on a little earlier on and had to... Oh, he spun it.
Did spin,
wow,
yeah.
He spun and managed to not hit the wall. That's remarkable.
I don't know what's going on. All the time I'm off throttle there, the car just pushes.
Copy that, Max.
That's a really interesting spin for Verstappen, because it was almost like, you know, spinning on a dime or whatever you call it.
Yeah, that's right. Pivoted very, very quickly in a small space. But what he's talking about there is lifting off the throttle, coming into the corner, of course, lift off the throttle, move on to the brake. And they have various settings that do kind of keep the engine pushing to some extent. So you get a little bit of engine performance, even though you've lifted off the throttle, just to try and, you know, bring the balance into the way you want it coming into the corner.
We really need to check that. I go into that corner, off throttle, downshifting, and it's just pushing.
Understood, Max.
So I think, a little bit of tweaking of software parameters of the settings hopefully should cure that. And they'll be able to see it, of course, very clearly in the data. But something that's quite disconcerting from a driver's perspective, of course, because you need a little bit of it sometimes just to balance the car as you get that massive weight transfer from front to rear and you jump on the brakes. Rear to front as you jump on the brakes. Sometimes the engine can just help you stabilise the car a little bit. But if it's too much, of course, you end up facing the wrong way.
So some practice starts coming in. I'll chuck this. Oh, no, I won't chuck. Tony wrote an interesting email, but I've left it too late. But interesting comment from Mark Priestley on fire extinguishers. At club level, we dread powder extinguishers. They're very effective, but they form a concrete all over the car.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Foam seems to just disperse itself when used on our cars. Is it something different in F1?
I don't know. I don't know the answer. But yeah, I agree with you. Powder is also an absolute nightmare. It's like the Flovis stuff.
Yeah.
You never get rid of it. It's there for the entire season once you've used it in all the nooks and crannies. So... yeah, I feel the pain of the guys who have to somehow clean that off.
You can read Andrew Benson's Free Practice 1 report on the BBC Sport website imminently once he's finished writing it. Are you not going to finish writing it? What was that shrug for?
It's first practice, isn't it? What does it mean?
Is this not one of your great
Sometimes
masterpieces?
I feel like writing that, you know. the Azerbaijan Grand Prix first practice session happened, and this was the order. come back later for more information.
Okay.
It doesn't say that, but sometimes I feel like it should.
It's paid by the word, so it won't say that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not paid by the word.
What's the headline?
I don't write the headlines.
Okay. Well, I'm going to end the program the same way Andrew's going to write his piece. Free practice 1 happened. This was the order: Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, the top 3. Come back and join us later for the rest of the story. We'll be back in 2 hours' time for the second hour of free practice sessions, where we will learn more, hopefully, and including some long runs. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. See you in a couple of hours.